"Watch out!" shouted Liam, just as he lunged towards the woman crossing the busy avenue, completely unaware of the truck speeding toward her with no brakes. The deafening blare of the horn echoed through the street, making pedestrians freeze, in shock. But Liam was already moving, faster than he ever had in his 32 years. In a single desperate motion, he grabbed the woman's arm, yanking her with all his strength onto the sidewalk. The massive truck roared past them, missing by mere inches. Both of them crashed to the ground in a chaotic sprawl, papers flying. From her hands scattered like leaves in a storm. For a moment, everything was a blur. Sounds of brakes, screeching, people gasping. Sirens in the distance. But then their eyes met. Liam's breath was still ragged from the adrenaline, his rough hands still gripping her arm tightly. The woman, dressed in a pristine white suit, her blonde hair now disheveled, stared back at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. You saved my life," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Liam loosened his grip, helping her sit up as he asked, "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to look away from him. Then, as if snapping back to reality, a sharp voice cut through the moment. Charlotte, a tall man in an impeccable suit, came rushing towards them from a black luxury car that had just screeched to a stop. The man barely spared Liam a glance as he took the woman's hand and pulled her to her feet. "What the hell happened? I've been waiting for you at the restaurant." Charlotte gestured vaguely toward Liam. "This man, he saved me. A truck lost its brakes and if it weren't for him—" Yeah, thanks," the man interrupted dismissively, only now giving Liam a cursory look. "We need to go. We've got an important meeting." Without waiting for her to finish, he practically dragged Charlotte towards the car. But as she was being led away, she twisted to look back at Liam, her eyes still locked on his. Thank you so much," she called out just before the car door slammed shut behind her. Liam stood there amid the growing crowd of pedestrians and approaching police officers, staring after the car as it sped away. He knelt to the ground, gathering, the papers strewn around. Among them, one item caught his eye, a sleek business card half hidden under a discarded coffee cup. He picked it up and read, "Charlotte Foster Vice President, Special Projects Foster Developments." His stomach clenched at the name. Hours later, as the orange glow of sunset bathed the old neighborhood, Liam returned to his modest workshop, nestled in a quiet, traditional district of Mexico City. The carved wooden sign above the entrance swayed gently in the breeze. Herrera and Sons, Artisan Carpentry. Since 1978, inside, his younger sister Emily peeked out from behind the counter, adjusting her glasses. "Finally!" she exclaimed. "Mr. Monroe called 3 times. He cancelled the restaurant furniture order." Liam set his toolbox down with a frustrated sigh. "He cancelled? Just like that? We already bought the materials." Emily shrugged, frowning as she checked the ledger. "Said he found some industrial supplier that can deliver everything in half the time and for less money." Liam ran a hand through his hair, looking around the small workshop cluttered with half-finished chairs and wood shavings. "We can't keep going like this," Emily added quietly. "This month we barely made enough for half the rent." At 32, Liam felt the weight of the family business more than ever. After their parents' passing, he had inherited both the workshop and the debt. His hands, calloused and rough from years of shaping wood, carried the stories of sacrifice and resilience. As if to confirm his worst fears, the door creaked open, and in stepped Mr. Lewis, the building's owner. "Good afternoon, kids." Mr. Lewis greeted them with a serious nod. "Look, I appreciate you both, but I've been accepting partial rent for 4 months now. If you're not caught up in the next 2 months, I'll have to ask you to vacate." After he left, silence hung thick in the air. "We'll think of something," Liam said, though the words rang hollow. "We always do," Emily replied, forcing a small smile. That night, while sifting through the classifieds in an old newspaper, Something caught Liam's attention. A large ad near the back page. Foster Development seeks artisan carpenters for National Theatre Restoration Project. His eyes widened. In the accompanying photo, standing beside an older man Liam recognized. Instantly, as Richard Foster, the concrete king of Mexico, was Charlotte. The same woman whose life he had saved that morning. Liam couldn't believe the coincidence. "The woman I saved," he whispered. Emily glanced up from her laptop. "What are you staring at?" Liam turned the newspaper towards her. "I think I just found our salvation." Emily frowned, reading the ad, then looked back at her brother skeptically. "Foster Developments? The Fosters? Liam? You know who they are." Liam's jaw tensed. Of course he knew. Everyone in the neighborhood did. They're the reason we lost everything. But even as Emily's words echoed in his mind, he couldn't shake the memory of Charlotte's eyes as she thanked him. The next morning, Liam found himself standing in front of the towering glass facade of Foster Development's headquarters. His portfolio of work clutched tightly in his hand. The building was so sleek, so polished, it felt like it belonged to another universe altogether. His worn boots and best-collared shirt suddenly felt completely out of place. "I'm here for the National Theatre Restoration interview," he told the receptionist. She glanced him up and down, her tone cold and detached. 15th floor, conference room. Most of the other candidates waiting there wore sharp suits, their portfolios tucked into leather cases. Liam took a deep breath and sat down, ignoring the stares. An hour passed before an assistant stepped into the room. Herrera. Liam Herrera. Liam stood, his heart pounding as he followed her into the conference room, and there she was, Charlotte, dressed in a sharp navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sophisticated bun. She looked up from her notes and their eyes locked. "You," she murmured, her voice soft with recognition. Liam gave her a small nod. "We met yesterday." The architect seated beside her looked confused. "In unusual circumstances," Liam added with a faint ironic smile. Charlotte cleared her throat, turning to her colleagues. "This man saved my life yesterday." The architects exchanged glances, one raising an eyebrow in disbelief. "Well, that's quite a coincidence," one of them muttered, flipping through Liam's portfolio. Liam laid out his photographs, a grand mahogany staircase restored in a historic home downtown, intricate hand-carved furniture, century-old doors meticulously brought back to life. The architects barely paid attention, but Charlotte leaned forward, studying every detail. Then, one of the architects closed the folder and said, "Thank you for your time, Mr. Herrera, but we're looking for professionals with large-scale project experience." Before Liam could respond, Charlotte cut in sharply. "I'm hiring him." The room went silent. She turned to the others. "Look at the precision in these carvings. This is exactly what we need for the theatre's moldings." "Miss Foster, with all due respect, I'm the project director." Charlotte interrupted, her voice steady. "And he's the carpenter I want on my team." Liam exhaled slowly, his pulse finally steadying. As he left the building later with instructions to start in 3 weeks, Liam couldn't help but glance once more at the gleaming logo of Foster Developments above the door. He muttered under his breath, "What the hell am I getting myself into?" 3 weeks later, Liam stood at the entrance of the National Theatre, staring up at the ornate facade that had once been the pride of the city, now faded and weather-worn. He adjusted the strap on his tool bag, inhaling deeply. This place wasn't just another project, it was a monument, and now it was his job to help bring it back to life. Inside, the grand hall smelled of dust and varnish, its towering columns wrapped in scaffolding. Dozens of workers and architects moved about with blueprints and equipment, their voices echoing off marble walls. As Liam approached the main worksite, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Mr. Herrera." He turned. There she was, Charlotte Foster, clipboard in hand, her eyes bright and focused despite the early morning hour. "Miss Foster," Liam replied, nodding politely. "Please, Just Charlotte. She smiled briefly, then gestured towards the central scaffold. I wanted to personally welcome you to the project. Liam looked around, still somewhat overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the restoration. I've never worked on something this big, he admitted. Charlotte tilted, her head slightly. But you've worked on pieces that mattered. She pointed to the photos from his portfolio, now pinned to a board in the temporary project office nearby. That staircase, the hand-carved panels. I could see the care you put into them. Liam shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Wood remembers, he said simply. It just needs someone to help it find its shape again. Charlotte smiled at that, her eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. Before she could say anything else, a voice called out from across the hall. Charlotte! Nathan strode towards them, his expensive leather shoes barely, making a sound on the dusty floor. His tailored jacket was immaculate, despite the construction environment. I've been looking for you everywhere, Nathan said, wrapping a possessive arm around her waist. Then he turned to Liam, eyeing him up and down. And you must be the hero carpenter. Liam nodded stiffly. Liam Herrera. Nathan smirked faintly, then turned back to Charlotte. We're due at the investors' lunch. They're waiting. Charlotte glanced at her watch, then at Liam. I'll be back later to check on the progress. Nathan led her away, his hand still firmly on her back. Liam watched them disappear into the administrative wing of the theatre. He exhaled slowly, then turned towards the scaffold where his crew was already assembling. As the day progressed, Liam immersed himself in the work. The theatre's mouldings, once magnificent, were now cracked and faded. His task was to restore them, not replicate, not replace, but bring them back to their original splendor. Hours passed in quiet concentration until the sound of heels on marble made him glance up. Charlotte stood a few steps away, watching him. You work like someone who belongs here, she said softly. Liam smiled faintly, wiping sawdust from his hands. Maybe I do. Charlotte approached, running her fingers gently along the carved edge he had just restored. This is beautiful. It looks exactly like the original. My grandfather used to say that wood has a memory, Liam replied. You just have to help it remember. Charlotte smiled, repeating softly, help it remember. They stood there for a moment. The only sound, the distant murmur of workers and the hum of tools. Then Charlotte cleared her throat, stepping back. I'd like to show you something. She led him through a side corridor to a locked door, then produced a keycard. This was my grandfather's office when the Foster family funded part of the theatre's original construction, she explained, pushing the door open. Inside, the air was thick with history. Antique desks, faded photographs, and blueprints filled the room. On the wall, an old black-and-white portrait showed a man with stern eyes and a proud stance, Richard Foster, decades younger. He was obsessed with preserving the city's heritage, Charlotte said, tracing the edge of the photograph with her finger. It's why I fought for this project. Liam looked around the office, taking in the relics. And yet, your family also built over a lot of that heritage, he said quietly. Charlotte's hand froze on the photo. She turned to him, her face unreadable. I know, she whispered. For a moment neither spoke. Then Charlotte turned to a drawer, pulling out a folder. This is the full scope of the restoration, she said, handing it to him. Not just moldings. We're rebuilding the entire main hall, the balconies, the private boxes, everything. Liam flipped through the detailed plans, feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. This is huge, Charlotte nodded. That's why I want you on more than just the moldings. Liam looked up sharply. What do you mean? I want you to lead the artisan carpentry team. Liam blinked, stunned. I've never led a project this big. You've never been given the chance, Charlotte replied gently. Your work speaks for itself. Liam hesitated, staring at the intricate drawings, the lists of materials, the timelines. This wasn't just sanding down panels or replacing beams. This was a months-long, high-profile commitment under the constant scrutiny of investors, press, and the city's elite. "I don't know," he started. Charlotte stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I know who you are." Liam's head snapped up. "You're the man who pulled me out of traffic," she continued. "You didn't think about the risk. You just acted. That's the kind of person I want leading this." Liam exhaled slowly. "I'll think about it," Charlotte nodded, stepping back to give him space. As she turned to leave, she added quietly, "You should know. Some people won't be happy about this." Liam didn't need to ask who she meant. He could already feel Nathan's cold stare from across the theatre. Later that night, back at the workshop, Emily was sanding a table leg when Liam walked in, dropping the heavy folder onto the workbench. She looked up, puzzled. "What's that?" Liam sank into the chair, rubbing the back of his neck. "An offer to lead the carpentry team at the National Theatre." Emily's eyes widened. "Liam, that's incredible." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the folder. "It's Foster Developments." Emily's expression darkened. "You mean the same people who—" "Yes." Emily set down the sander and crossed her arms. "So, are you going to take it?" Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I don't know," Emily let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. "You always say the past shapes us. But it doesn't have to define us." Liam looked at her, considering those words. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. He glanced at the folder again, then at the tools hung neatly on the wall. Generations of their family's craftsmanship etched into each chisel and mallet. Finally, he exhaled. I have to." Emily smiled softly. "Then do it." The next morning, Liam called the project office. "This is Liam Herrera. Tell Charlotte Foster I'm in." Days turned into weeks as Liam settled into the project at the National Theatre. His days consumed by measurements, sanding, and the delicate art of restoring wood to its former glory. His hands moved instinctively, tracing the curves of century-old moldings, coaxing life back into what time had nearly erased. Each morning, Charlotte would walk through the site, clipboard in hand, offering brief words of encouragement or asking pointed questions about the progress. Their conversations, at first professional, had begun to linger longer. Between discussions of technique and materials, personal stories started to surface. One afternoon, as Liam carefully shaved down a warped piece of mahogany on the private balcony box, Charlotte appeared beside him, leaning casually on the railing. "Where did you learn this?" she asked, watching him work. Liam didn't look up. "Family business. My grandfather taught my dad. My dad taught me." Charlotte ran her hand along the smooth surface he'd just finished. "Do you enjoy it?" Liam smiled faintly. "It's not a job, it's a calling," Charlotte chuckled softly. "I studied architecture in Europe, but sometimes I think I missed out on learning something real, something with my hands." "You make decisions that shape skylines," Liam said. "That's real enough." Charlotte shrugged, looking out over the grand hall. "Sometimes I wonder if we're just replacing history instead of preserving it." Liam paused, his chisel hovering over the wood. "Depends on who's making the decisions." Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment before a voice interrupted. Them. Charlotte. Nathan stood below, near the orchestra pit, arms crossed, his gaze sharp. Charlotte straightened immediately. I should go." Liam watched her descend the scaffold stairs, meeting Nathan, who immediately leaned in, speaking low and fast. She responded quietly, then followed him out of the theatre. Liam exhaled, returning to his work, but the air around him now felt heavier. Later that evening, as he locked up his tools, he found Charlotte standing near the entrance, arms folded. "You didn't have to wait," Liam said, surprised. I wanted to, Charlotte replied. Do you have time for coffee? Liam hesitated but nodded. They walked down the street to a small cafe tucked between crumbling facades, a remnant of a city that was rapidly vanishing under glass towers and luxury developments. Over steaming cups of coffee, they spoke not of the project but of themselves. I used to live in a building just like that one, Charlotte said, pointing to the old apartments across the street, before my dad's company bought up the block. Liam's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Charlotte didn't notice. She was lost in thought. Sometimes I wonder if we've built too much, taken too much. Liam stirred his coffee slowly. Sometimes we don't get a choice. Charlotte looked at him curiously. What do you mean? Liam opened his mouth to answer, but stopped himself. He wasn't ready, not yet. As they left the cafe, the first drops of rain began to fall. Looks like we'll be working through the storm tomorrow, Charlotte said with a smile. But Liam didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere. That night, back at the workshop, Emily was at her laptop, her brows furrowed. What are you working on? Liam asked, hanging up his jacket. Emily didn't look up. Research on foster developments. Liam stiffened. Emily turned the screen towards him. A black and white photo of a familiar building appeared, their old apartment complex. Why are you looking at that? Liam asked, his voice low. Emily scrolled further, revealing a news clipping. Because I think you need to remember where all this started. The headline read, Family Displaced as Foster Developments Demolishes Historic Complex. Liam's throat tightened. Emily pulled up another article. Local woman dies following forced eviction. The words hit Liam like a hammer to the chest. I didn't know these were still online, he muttered. Emily closed the laptop, turning to him. You're getting close to her, aren't you? Liam didn't answer. You can't forget what they did to us, Emily pressed. I haven't, Liam said sharply. Emily softened. Then why haven't you told her? Liam ran a hand through his hair, pacing the workshop. Because I don't know what it would change. Emily stood, crossing to him. Maybe it would change everything. Before Liam could respond, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Mr. Lewis standing there, holding a folded notice. I'm sorry, Liam, Mr. Lewis said, handing him the paper. But I have to post this. Liam unfolded it slowly. Eviction warning, final notice. You've got 2 months, Mr. Lewis added, before turning and walking back down the street. Liam stood in the doorway, the rain now falling steadily. Soaking the paper in his hands, Emily appeared beside him, her voice quiet. What are we going to do? Liam didn't answer. The next morning at the theatre, he buried himself in work, trying to drown out everything else. But as he adjusted a panel on the main stage, a loud crack echoed through the hall. He turned just in time to see the scaffold above him sway dangerously. Liam! Charlotte's voice screamed from across the hall. Liam jumped to the side as the upper section of the scaffold collapsed partially, sending a cascade of tools and wood planks crashing down where he had just been standing. Workers rushed over as Charlotte sprinted to his side. Are you okay? She asked, her hands on his shoulders, her eyes wide with panic. Liam nodded, breathing hard. Yeah, I'm fine. Charlotte looked up at the scaffold, then back at Liam. This wasn't an accident, she said, her voice low. Liam frowned. What? She pointed to one of the joints. The bolts had been loosened, deliberately. Liam stared in disbelief. Charlotte stood, scanning the site. Across the hall, Nathan was watching them, his expression unreadable. Later that day, Charlotte confronted Nathan in his office at Foster Developments. You did this, she accused, slamming the door behind her. Nathan didn't even flinch. Did what? The scaffold. Liam could have died. Nathan stood slowly from his chair, adjusting his cufflinks. Accidents happen, Charlotte's fists clenched. "You sabotaged the site." Nathan leaned closer, his voice cold. "You're spending too much time with a carpenter. People are starting to talk." Charlotte's eyes flashed with fury. "Stay away from him," Nathan smirked. "I can't make any promises." Back at the workshop that night, Liam sat silently at the workbench, staring at the eviction notice, still pinned to the wall. Emily sat across from him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think it was him?" Liam nodded slowly. "I know." "It was." Emily looked down at her hands. "You need to tell her the truth, Liam." Liam exhaled deeply, staring at the unfinished piece of molding in front of him. "I don't know if I can." The next morning, Liam was at the theatre before sunrise, sanding the final panels of the grand balcony. His hands moved with precision, but his mind was anything but steady. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charlotte's face, heard Emily's words. "You need to tell her the truth." But how could he? This project, this opportunity, it could save the workshop, save their lives. But the truth, it could destroy everything. As he ran the sander along the wood grain, he didn't notice Charlotte approaching until she was standing right beside him. "You're here early," she said softly. Liam paused, brushing the dust from his hands. "Couldn't sleep." Charlotte studied him, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Me neither." For a moment they stood in silence, surrounded by the echoes of the empty theatre. Then Charlotte broke it. "I know about the scaffold," she said quietly. "It was Nathan." Liam's jaw tightened. "I confronted him," Charlotte continued. "He denied it, of course, but I know him." Liam swallowed hard. "He won't stop." Charlotte sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm not sure what to do." "You should walk away," Liam said, meeting her eyes. "From all of it." Charlotte shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping. "It's not that simple." She gestured to the theatre around them. This is my family's legacy." Liam looked at the intricate molding he'd spent weeks restoring. "Legacies can be rebuilt," he said. Charlotte smiled faintly. "That sounds like something a carpenter would say." Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and groaned. "My father. He wants me at the office." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Are you free for dinner tonight? I'd like to talk about everything." Liam hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." Charlotte smiled, then disappeared down the hall. Liam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He couldn't keep lying. That evening, back at the workshop, Emily was sketching a new furniture design when Liam walked in, grabbing his jacket. "You're going to tell her?" Emily asked without looking up. Liam nodded. Emily set down her pencil and crossed the room. "You're doing the right thing." Liam didn't answer, just pulled the door shut behind him. At the small restaurant where they agreed to meet, Charlotte was already waiting, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her eyes distant. "You okay?" Liam asked as he sat down. Charlotte smiled weakly. "Just thinking." They ordered, then sat in an awkward silence until Charlotte finally spoke. "My father wants me to take over the company." Liam's eyebrows rose. "That's big." Charlotte nodded, staring at the flickering candle between them. "But I don't know if I can do it." Liam leaned forward. "Why not?" Charlotte looked up, her eyes glossy. "Because I'm not sure I believe in what we do anymore." Liam's heart pounded in his chest. Now was the moment. "There's something I need to tell you," Liam said, his voice low. Charlotte looked at him, concern spreading across her face. Liam swallowed hard. 12 years ago, my family lived in a building in La Condesa. My father had his carpentry shop on the ground floor. My mother, she was sick." Charlotte listened intently, her brows knitting together. "One day, we got a notice. Said we had a week to vacate. No negotiations, no options." Liam's voice wavered, but he kept going. "They said it was for redevelopment. Foster developments." Charlotte's her face went pale. We begged for more time. My mother was too sick to move. He paused, the memory choking him. But the crew came anyway. One of the foremen. He pushed my mother out of the way to get through. She fell. She had a heart attack right there. Charlotte gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She died 3 days later. Liam exhaled shakily. My father. He couldn't handle it. He fell into depression, and a year later he was gone too. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. Liam, I didn't know. There's more, Liam continued, voice tight. I attacked the foreman. I lost control. Spent 6 months in prison. Charlotte sat in stunned silence, tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't know who you were that day on the street, Liam said. But when I found your card... Charlotte shook her head, wiping her tears. I swear, I didn't know about that project. Liam nodded. I know. She reached across the table, taking his hand. I'm so sorry. Liam looked away, blinking back tears. I couldn't tell you. Not until now. Charlotte squeezed his hand. Thank you for trusting me. She took a deep breath, gathering herself. I'm going to make this right. Liam looked at her, skeptical. You can't undo the past. No, Charlotte agreed, but I can change the future. They sat there, hands entwined across the table, both quietly realizing that everything between them had shifted. The next morning, Charlotte walked into her father's office at Foster Developments, her posture straight, her jaw set. Richard Foster looked up from his desk, surprised. You're early. Charlotte dropped a thick file onto his desk. What's this? Richard asked. Charlotte met his gaze evenly. Every redevelopment project we've done over the last 20 years. Richard leaned back, frowning. Why? Charlotte folded her arms. Because I've been looking through them, and there are patterns, Dad. Families displaced, homes demolished, often with little or no compensation. Richard's face hardened. That's the nature of development. No, Charlotte shot back. That's exploitation. Richard stood, his voice rising. Everything I've built, everything you enjoy, comes from these decisions. Charlotte didn't flinch. I'm not blaming you for building something. I'm blaming you for how you did it. Richard's eyes narrowed. You sound just like your mother. Charlotte's breath caught. She believed in community, in people. Richard scoffed. And look where that got her. Charlotte shook, her head turning for the door. I'm going to fix this. Richard's voice followed her out. If you do, you'll destroy everything we've built. Charlotte paused at the doorway, then turned. Then maybe it should be destroyed. Back at the workshop, Liam sat with Emily, showing her the eviction notice again. Emily frowned, then glanced at the clock. You told her? Liam nodded. And? Liam sighed. She wants to fix it. Emily crossed her arms. You trust her? Liam looked down at his hands, the same hands that had pulled Charlotte from traffic, that had restored so many broken things. I think I do. Emily smiled faintly. Then maybe we're not the only ones who know how to rebuild. Liam looked out the workshop window at the rain falling gently on the street, feeling, for the first time in years, that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The morning of the partial inauguration of the National Theatre arrived with the city draped in a haze of anticipation. Photographers, investors and journalists filled the grand hall, their conversations a steady murmur beneath the soaring ceilings Liam had helped restore. Liam wasn't supposed to be there. Charlotte had insisted on inviting him, but the official list, carefully curated by Richard Foster, left no room for carpenters. Still, Liam stood in the shadows of the main corridor, watching as guests in expensive suits admired the intricate moldings, completely unaware of the months of work behind them. At the center of it all stood Charlotte, poised and elegant, dressed in a deep emerald gown that caught the light with every movement. Nathan stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Liam's chest tightened. He should leave, But before he could turn away, Charlotte spotted him. Her eyes widened, a flicker of warmth breaking through the polished veneer. She took a step toward him, but Nathan intercepted, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. Charlotte hesitated, then turned back toward the stage where Richard was, already stepping up to the microphone. "Welcome, everyone," Richard began, his voice echoing through the hall. "Today we celebrate not just the restoration of a building, but the preservation of our cultural legacy." Liam leaned against a pillar, staring up at the restored balcony he had poured his soul into. "You should be up there," a voice said, beside him. Liam turned to see Marcus, one of the other carpenters on the team, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "I'm not exactly on the guest list," Liam replied, taking the offered drink anyway. Marcus shrugged. "You're the one who made this place shine." Liam smiled faintly but said nothing. Richard continued his speech, weaving in familiar phrases about progress, legacy, and family. Liam barely heard it, his focus locked on Charlotte, standing still and radiant as flashbulbs popped around her. When the speech ended, applause thundered through the hall, and Nathan took the microphone. "Before we continue with the tour," Nathan said, flashing his practiced politician's smile, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special." Charlotte's brow furrowed in confusion as Nathan gestured toward the wings of the stage. From the corner of the room, a man stepped forward carrying a slim folder. Nathan took it with a flourish and turned back to the audience. "Some of you may know that this project brought together incredible talent, including a certain artisan who's become rather close to our team." Charlotte's eyes widened in alarm. Nathan continued smoothly, "But I believe in transparency, and so I'd like to share something important about Mr. Liam Herrera." Liam froze, his chest tightening. Charlotte took an urgent step forward. "Nathan, don't—" But Nathan ignored her, holding up the folder. "Mr. Herrera is, in fact, a convicted felon," Nathan said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "He served prison time for assaulting an employee of Foster Developments during a lawful redevelopment operation." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liam felt the heat rise in his face as dozens of eyes turned toward him. "This is absurd," Charlotte shouted, moving to intercept Nathan, but he raised his hand to stop her. "Public projects deserve public knowledge," Nathan said with cold finality. Charlotte looked frantically around, then spotted Liam standing frozen in place. "Liam!" she called out, but he was already moving, pushing past the curious glances and the murmurs spreading like wildfire through the room. Outside, the crisp air hit him like a slap. He walked quickly down the theatre steps, his heart pounding. Behind him, Charlotte's voice rang out again. "Liam, wait!" But he didn't. He couldn't. He kept walking, each step heavier than the last, until the sounds of the theatre faded behind him. Later that evening, Charlotte stood outside the workshop, rain soaking through her coat, her hand poised to knock on the door. It opened before she could. Emily stood there, her expression hard. "What do you want?" "I need to see Liam," Charlotte said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily crossed her arms. "He doesn't need any more of your family's humiliation." Charlotte swallowed hard. "Please." Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. Charlotte entered the workshop, where Liam sat at the workbench, staring blankly at a half-finished chair leg. He didn't look up. "I'm sorry," Charlotte said, her voice breaking. Liam kept sanding, the rasping sound filling the heavy silence. "I didn't know Nathan would do that," Charlotte continued, stepping closer. Liam set the sandpaper down slowly and finally met her gaze. "You didn't stop him either," Charlotte flinched. "I tried," Liam sighed, running his hands through his hair. "You have no idea what it's like to stand there exposed, like I'm some criminal." "You're not," Charlotte said firmly, sitting on the stool across from him. "You defended your family." Liam looked away, staring at the wall where the eviction notice still hung. "It doesn't matter now." Charlotte followed his gaze. then stood and pulled the notice down, crumpling it in her hand. "It matters to me," she said, her voice steady. Liam shook his head. "Your family destroyed mine." Charlotte inhaled sharply, but didn't deny. "It I know," she said quietly. Liam stood abruptly, pacing the workshop. "You don't get it," he said, his voice rising. "You get to walk into these projects, give speeches, make decisions, but we're the ones who lose our homes, our families." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "You're right." Liam stopped, stunned by her admission. "I'm not here to defend what my family did," Charlotte continued, stepping closer. "I'm here because I want to fix it." Liam let out a bitter laugh. "You think you can fix this?" Charlotte nodded. "I have to try." She pulled a slim folder from her bag and placed it on the workbench. Liam frowned, then opened it slowly. Inside were documents, detailed records of redevelopment projects, compensation agreements, and, most shockingly, evidence of forged signatures. "I've been investigating," Charlotte said. "What happened to your family? It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal." Liam stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm going to expose it," Charlotte said firmly. "All of it." Liam looked up at her, the anger and pain in his eyes slowly giving way to something else, something closer to hope, but too fragile to name. Charlotte reached out, resting her hand over his. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, or my family, but I am asking you to let me help." Liam exhaled slowly, then nodded once. Charlotte smiled faintly. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I didn't fall in love with you because you saved me. I fell in love with you because you're the only person who ever made me question everything I believed in." Liam stood in stunned silence as the door closed softly behind her. Later that night, Emily found him still sitting at the workbench, the folder of documents spread out before him. "You okay?" she asked. Liam nodded slowly. "She's trying to help," he said quietly. Emily smiled faintly. "So are you." Liam leaned back in the chair, looking around the workshop that had been both his sanctuary and his prison. Maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to be either anymore. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope in a storm. Charlotte worked tirelessly at Foster Developments, quietly gathering more files, sifting through decades of projects, tracing the web of evictions, demolitions and backdoor deals that had built her family's empire. Every night, she met with Emily and Liam in the back of the workshop, transforming the modest carpentry space into a clandestine war room. Liam spread out architectural plans across the workbench. "These are the original blueprints of our old building," he said, pointing to the signatures at the bottom. "That's my father's, but that one," Emily cut in. "Forged." Charlotte nodded, flipping through the legal documents she'd unearthed. "Multiple cases just like yours, all hidden under layers of shell companies and third-party contractors." Liam leaned back, exhaling deeply. "How do we even begin to fight something this big?" Charlotte looked up, her eyes steady. "We don't fight it alone." That same evening, Mrs. Margaret Whitmore arrived at the workshop, her cane tapping gently against the wooden floor. "Mrs. Whitmore," Liam greeted, helping her to a chair. "I heard what happened at the theatre," she said, settling in. "I figured it was time I gave you this." She pulled an old weathered folder from her bag and placed it on the table. "My late husband was preparing a class action lawsuit before he passed. He believed, as I do, that the truth always comes out." Liam opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly as he saw affidavits, photographs, and statements from former residents, people who had lost everything, just like his family. "There's enough here to launch a real case," Emily said, scanning the pages quickly. "But we'll need a lawyer," Liam added. "And money." Charlotte shook her head. "You have me." Liam looked at her, skeptical. Charlotte continued. My position at Foster gives me access to the legal team and resources. Emily raised an eyebrow. You're going to use your family's own lawyers against them? Charlotte smiled faintly. Not exactly, but I know where to find the right people. At that moment, Liam's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's the security chief from the theater. He answered, and the man's voice came through, tense and urgent. There's a leak in the roof. Water's seeping into the archives. Without thinking, Liam grabbed his jacket. Charlotte stood too. I'm coming with you. They arrived at the National Theatre as rain pelted down in heavy sheets. Workers were frantically placing tarps and buckets, trying to contain the damage. Liam ran up the scaffold to the upper beams, inspecting the breach. It's bad, he called down. The water's getting into the historical archives. Charlotte, already soaked, grabbed a crate and began moving fragile documents out of harm's. Wait, Liam climbed down, joining her. Here, he said, handing her a heavy box of parchment maps. They worked side by side, hands moving quickly, until the worst of the leak was controlled. Finally, exhausted and drenched, they sat in the corner of the archive room, breathing heavily as water still dripped rhythmically from the ceiling. Charlotte laughed softly, leaning back against the wall. I didn't think tonight would end like this, Liam smiled, brushing wet hair from his face. Neither did I. Charlotte turned her head toward him, her expression suddenly serious. I meant what I said. I'm going to fix this, Liam sighed. It's not just about fixing it, Charlotte frowned. What do you mean? Liam looked around at the ancient books and blueprints stacked on the shelves. It's about rebuilding. Differently, Charlotte nodded slowly, understanding. Before she could say more, the heavy doors creaked open. Nathan stood there, perfectly dry under an umbrella, his expression icy. Well, isn't this cozy? He said, stepping inside. Charlotte stood immediately facing him. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same, Nathan replied, his eyes flicking to Liam. Always in the right place at the right time, aren't you, Carpenter? Liam stood as well, but kept silent. Nathan pulled an envelope from inside his coat and tossed it onto a table. You should know. I've hired a private investigator. Charlotte's heart sank. Nathan smiled, coldly. I know everything about your little project. The secret meetings, the files you've been copying, even your late-night visits here. Charlotte's fists clenched. Stay out of this. Nathan ignored her, turning to Liam. And you, such a tragic story. But no one's going to care. He leaned in closer. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you're not back in prison. Liam's jaw tensed, but he didn't move. Charlotte stepped between them. Leave. Nathan smiled thinly. You think you can take down your father's empire? You'll destroy yourself in the process. Charlotte didn't flinch. Then so be it. Nathan let out a low laugh, then turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the hollow chamber. Liam and Charlotte stood in silence, listening as the rain intensified against the theater windows. Finally, Charlotte turned to Liam. We have to move faster. Liam nodded. Back at the workshop the next day, the three of them, Charlotte, Liam, and Emily, worked late into the night, compiling all the evidence into a comprehensive case. Emily organized files digitally, while Charlotte drafted statements and legal briefs. At one point, Liam paused, looking at Charlotte across the table. You're risking everything, Charlotte shrugged. You're worth it. Liam swallowed hard, not sure how to respond. Emily smiled faintly, not looking up from her laptop. About time someone realized that. The next morning, Charlotte stood before the board of directors at Foster Developments, presenting her proposal. As of today, I am creating the Foster Foundation for Ethical Redevelopment, she announced. The board members exchanged confused glances. Richard, sitting at the head of the table, narrowed his eyes. What is this? Charlotte looked at him directly. It's a commitment to compensate every family displaced by our developments. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard stood abruptly. You're undermining everything this company stands for. Charlotte didn't blink. No, I'm redefining it. Richard pointed at her. If you do this, you're out. Charlotte met his stare. Then I'm out. She turned and walked out of the boardroom, her heart pounding. Later that evening at the workshop, she shared the news with Liam and Emily. I resigned. Liam stared at her in disbelief. You walked away? Charlotte nodded. Liam smiled. Slowly. I guess you're serious. Charlotte stepped closer, taking his hand. I've never been more serious. At that moment, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up, eyes wide. The story's out. On the screen was the headline, Foster Heiress Exposes Family's Corruption, Launches New Foundation. Charlotte exhaled, relief and fear mixing in her chest. Liam pulled her into an embrace. You did it, he whispered. Charlotte held him tightly, knowing the real fight was still ahead, but they were no longer fighting alone. 6 months later, the city buzzed with anticipation as the National Theatre prepared for its grand reopening. The facade gleamed under the morning sun, the once crumbling columns now proudly restored to their original majesty. Inside, every detail, each ornate moulding, each polished banister, stood as a testament to craftsmanship, resilience, and the determination to rebuild more than just architecture. Backstage, Liam adjusted his tie in front of a small mirror, frowning as he struggled with the knot. Emily walked in carrying a sleek toolbox. She paused, smiling at him. You're great with wood, but hopeless with fabric, she teased, setting the box down. Liam sighed. It's not what I'm used. To Emily crossed the room and expertly tied the knot for him, then stepped back, giving him an approving nod. There, she said. Now you look like someone about to make history. Before Liam could reply, Charlotte appeared in the doorway. She wore a deep emerald dress that echoed the one from that fateful inauguration night, though this time there was no Nathan at her. Her side, no father standing in the wings, just her, standing confidently in her own story. Liam smiled as she approached. You're breathtaking, he said softly. Charlotte blushed, adjusting the simple pendant around her neck. You're not so bad yourself. Emily slipped out quietly, leaving them alone. Charlotte reached up and straightened Liam's tie one last time. Nervous? She asked. Liam exhaled. A little. Charlotte smiled, taking his hands. Just speak from the heart. He squeezed, her fingers gently, then glanced at her midsection. She followed his gaze and smiled wider, resting her hand on the soft curve of her belly. 3 more months, she said. Liam leaned in and kissed her forehead. I still can't believe it. You'd better start, Charlotte replied, laughing quietly. A knock sounded at the door. 5 minutes, someone called. Charlotte and Liam exchanged a glance, then walked out hand in hand toward the grand hall. The theatre was filled to capacity. Politicians, artists, former residents of neighborhoods once displaced by foster developments, and the families who had been part of the historic class action settlement. In the front row sat Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and beside her, Richard Foster, now retired, quieter, thinner, leaning heavily on a cane. He caught Charlotte's eye as she passed and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. On the grand stage, Charlotte and Liam stood together. Charlotte stepped forward first. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice strong but warm. Today is not just about the reopening of this beautiful theatre. It's about honoring the past and making peace with it. Applause rippled through the crowd. Charlotte glanced at Liam, then continued, When we started this restoration, we didn't just uncover layers of paint and plaster. We uncovered stories of families, of resilience, of what it means to build and to rebuild. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. For too long, development in this city meant erasure. But today we stand here committing to a different future. She turned slightly, gesturing for Liam to step forward. Liam took a deep breath and faced the crowd. "When I first walked into this theater," he began, his voice steady but raw, "I didn't know if I could do it." He glanced at Charlotte, then back at the audience. "My family lost everything to redevelopment. I carried that with me, the anger, the loss, but also the skills my father and grandfather gave me, the craft of working with wood, of restoring. What others discard." He paused, letting his words settle. "This theater has memory, just like the wood we restored here. It remembers every performance, every voice, every moment, and now it carries new memories." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden box. He opened it, revealing a delicate ring. Charlotte gasped softly as Liam knelt before her. The entire hall fell silent. "This box," Liam said, holding it up, "is made from scraps of the original wood we removed during the restoration. I wanted something from this place, from our place, to always be with us." He looked up at her, eyes shining. "Charlotte Foster, will you marry me?" Charlotte covered her mouth with one hand as tears welled in her eyes. Then she nodded, her voice breaking as she said, "Yes, yes." The audience erupted into applause, cheers echoing through the grand hall. Liam stood and slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into an embrace. As the ovation continued, Richard stood slowly, leaning on his cane, and was the first to begin clapping above his head. Mrs. Whitmore followed, then the entire audience, until the theatre vibrated with the sound of celebration. Later that evening, after the press interviews and photographs, Liam and Charlotte sat quietly in one of the private balconies, looking out over the empty hall. The chandeliers glittered above them, casting warm light over the seats below. Liam leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "It's hard to believe it's over." Charlotte smiled. "It's not over, it's just the beginning." He turned to her, his eyes soft. "You sure about that?" Charlotte nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "We've already rebuilt so much, and there's more to come." She placed his hand gently on her belly. Liam smiled, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the quiet peace of the theatre wash over him. Months later, the old workshop had transformed. Gone were the days of unpaid orders and eviction notices. Now it bustled with activity, not just a business, but a school of artisan crafts. Young apprentices from marginalized neighborhoods worked under Liam's and Emily's guidance, learning traditional techniques, breathing life back into an art that industry had nearly erased. One afternoon, Charlotte stood on the rooftop terrace of the workshop, overlooking the city with Liam by her side. Their small garden bloomed around. To them, a soft breeze carrying the scent of lavender and fresh wood shavings. Charlotte rubbed her belly, now visibly round, and looked at Liam. "Boy or girl?" she asked. Liam smiled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Doesn't matter. As long as they have your determination," Charlotte laughed quietly, "and your hands." They both fell silent, gazing out at the skyline. In the distance, the National Theatre stood proudly, its spire catching the afternoon light, a permanent reminder of what they'd accomplished together. Charlotte turned to Liam, her eyes reflecting the golden hue of the setting sun. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked softly. Liam thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said simply. "Every step, even the painful ones, brought us here." Charlotte leaned in, resting her head against his chest as the city moved around them, no longer divided by what had been destroyed, but connected by what had been rebuilt. And together they stood there, not as a carpenter and a developer, but as partners, proof that even the deepest scars could become the strongest foundations.